This is the shocking story of an American explorer in his 40s who, while traveling in Kyrgyzstan, encountered a nomadic tribe and, at their request, impregnated two sisters from the tribe, both in their 20s. Before watching the video, please subscribe and hit the like button. It helps us a lot. It wasn't until he was past 40 that Mike Anderson began to realize what he truly wanted in life. Born and raised in the United States, he graduated from college and enjoyed activities like hiking and trekking in the Rockies during his youth, but he always felt confined by the framework of a demanding career and societal expectations. Though unmarried, he'd focused on climbing the corporate ladder, spending over a decade moving from one office job to another in Chicago, seeking stability and success. Then, sometime after turning 40, the question, "Is it okay to just grow old like this?" began to linger in his mind. He was physically healthy and had always possessed a spirit of adventure. In his younger days, he devoured books about international mountaineering and exploration but lacked the financial means and time off work to pursue them. However, one day, he admitted to himself that he was living a life he didn't want. Eventually, he quit his high-paying corporate job. People around him called him reckless and tried to dissuade him, but he resolved to do what he wanted before it was too late. His exploration of the world's remote regions began with shorter trips to relatively nearby places like Canada's national parks, Mexico, or Costa Rica. But his ambition grew. He turned his attention to Central Asia, wanting to meet nomads and experience the vast nature of the highlands. Kyrgyzstan caught his eye. Information about its pristine natural landscapes, high-altitude lakes, and traditional nomadic culture stirred his heart. So, one early autumn, Mike Anderson left the United States and headed for Bishkek, the capital of Kyrgyzstan. After spending about a month there learning the language basics and gathering transportation information, he rented an SUV and drove towards the southeastern part of the country. He saved offline maps on his smartphone, learned some basic Russian and Kyrgyz phrases, and even prepared a satellite phone for emergencies. His ultimate destination was the mountainous region near Narin, a path leading towards the Tian Shan Mountains, sometimes unfolding into lakes and grasslands. As he drove the SUV along bumpy, unpaved roads, the cityscape gradually disappeared, replaced by endless mountains, valleys, and steppes. Fallen leaves colored the fields, the sky was high, and the air was cold. As the altitude increased, he felt slightly short of breath, but his heart felt lighter. Away from the hustle and bustle of his life back home, imagining himself grappling with the vast nature here made his heart pound. On the second day of driving, passing the outskirts of Narin city, he began to fear getting lost. But his sense of adventure was stronger. He thought, risk is part of the deal anyway. He stopped at small villages along the way to get water or food, and if he found a place to stay, he would rest for the night and communicate with the locals. Though his Russian was clumsy, he managed to convey his intentions using gestures and a translation app. After wandering around the southern Tian Shan area for nearly a week, he headed towards Sun Kul, famous for its high-altitude lake. He had heard that Sun Kul is a beautiful lake at an altitude of over 3,000 meters, nearly 10,000 feet, where nomads migrate and set up jairs, yurts, in the summer but gradually leave after autumn. Curiosity sparked within him. Perhaps he could meet nomads who were still there in late autumn. Driving somewhat aimlessly, he entered an unexpected direction and, around dusk, discovered what looked like a small Gur village. About 6 or 7 jairs were scattered here and there. The autumn wind was fierce, and sheep and horses roamed around the village. Mike thought, I'll be in trouble if I can't stay here overnight. He got out of the car and used hand gestures to ask if lodging was possible. Fortunately, the residents welcomed him kindly, and that night, the head of one Gur household took him in as a guest. The next morning, looking around, the village seemed like a typical nomadic settlement. All dwellings were jairs, and there was an atmosphere of preparation as winter approached. The population appeared to be around 30 people, mostly middle-aged or older, women, and children. Young men were scarcely seen. Mike looked around the village with curious eyes. It was an unfamiliar scene. He asked the family he had breakfast with for permission to explore the village surroundings and take pictures. The family readily agreed. Then, casually mixing in Russian words, he asked, "It seems there aren't many young men here?" The family smiled and briefly replied that most had gone to the cities or other regions to work. He knew that the phenomenon of young people leaving rural areas for cities or foreign countries was a serious issue globally, including in Kyrgyzstan. That afternoon, while strolling through a corner of the village, Mike spotted two young women. Both wore coats resembling traditional clothing, and possessed the distinct, sharp features typical of Kyrgyz women. One had long, straight black hair, while the other had her brown hair neatly tied up. Both looked to be in their early to mid-20s and had vibrant expressions. When they saw Mike, they smiled shyly and greeted him in English, "Hello." Mike happily replied, "Oh, hello. Good afternoon." He worried if they could communicate in English, but thankfully, the brown-haired woman seemed to speak a little English. She introduced themselves. The older sister was Lida, and she was Marek. When Mike haltingly said, "I'm American, my name is Michael Anderson, but you can call me Mike." "I'm exploring," Marek showed curiosity, saying, "Oh, America," perhaps picturing New York or Hollywood. While trying to converse with the two women, he vaguely sensed that this village was a special community. This was because Lida and Marek mentioned they were people upholding the nomadic lifestyle, inheriting traditions from the elders, and simultaneously hinted at the reason for the lack of young men in the village. Most had apparently gone to neighboring countries or cities to earn money due to economic circumstances. As a result, men were scarce, creating a situation where even finding a partner for marriage was difficult. When Mike cautiously asked, "Then how do you continue your family line?" Lida and Marek exchanged glances, looked slightly embarrassed, and avoided the topic. It must have been difficult to explain accurately in English. He guessed from their expressions that there was some story behind it but didn't press further. However, their smiling response, "If you stay a bit longer, we'll explain," left an impression. Originally, Mike planned to stay in this village for only a day or so and then head towards Suncoal Lake. But the weather suddenly turned bad, and his SUV seemed to have minor issues, so he decided to stay for an extra 2 days. The villagers welcomed this, treating him hospitably. They provided various conveniences and even arranged experiences similar to nomadic life for him. During this time, his interaction with the two sisters, Lida and Marek, deepened. Although their English wasn't fluent, they could chat using minimal words and body language. Lida, as the older sister, showed a calm and responsible side, while Marek had a cheerful personality, often bursting into bright laughter. Both had heard of American movies or music, which surprised Mike. Lida shyly said, "I've seen some online sometimes." Mike revealed he was in his early to mid-40s, but Lida and Marek didn't seem to perceive him as particularly old. Instead, they treated him like a strong explorer and praised him whenever he helped with chores around the village, saying he was amazing. Indeed, Mike had enjoyed hiking and outdoor activities since his youth, kept himself fit, and could handle moderate physical labor reasonably well. Some villagers proposed that he help with preparations for moving livestock or relocating soon. He gladly accepted. Such opportunities were rare, and he wanted to experience the local culture more directly. Lida and Marek helped alongside him, herding sheep and packing items for moving the jares. Occasionally, while resting, seeing the sisters' hair blowing in the wind, Mike felt a strange flutter in his heart. They had a completely different aura from the women he had met back in the States, pure yet wild, with a charm conveyed through subtle gestures rather than direct emotional expressions. Lida often asked Mike, "Why did you come to such a harsh place?" He answered honestly, "I gained my freedom a bit late, and I wanted to see more of the world. I just love adventure." Lida nodded and quietly replied, "We also want to go out and see the world, but reality isn't easy." Marek added, "My sister and I have lived here since we were children. We've been to the city once or twice, but we couldn't stay long because we didn't have money. Most men have left, so it's hard to find someone to marry." Her words hinted at the scarcity of men. A few more days passed. Mike needed car repairs and intended to go to a nearby town-like place, but the villagers persuaded him to stay, saying a young man from the village could fix it the next day. They advised him against going far, as the roads were rough and dangerous. Mike didn't mind, the village was unexpectedly growing on him. The nomad's simplicity, the grandeur of nature, and the subtle intimacy with Lida and Marek combined to make him want to stay. The sisters also frequently invited Mike to chat and served him food with care, treating him like an honored guest. The village elders showed favor, remarking, "That young foreigner works quite diligently and hard." Lida sometimes joked in English, implying, "You know we like you, right?" Mike was taken aback, thinking what's this, but it wasn't an unpleasant feeling. Then, one night, the sisters secretly called Mike for a talk. They built a bonfire in a quiet spot outside the Gers and had a long conversation using a mix of a translation app and English. It was there that Lida revealed a rather surprising custom. This village, or rather, their small nomadic tribe, faced a crisis of their lineage dying out due to an absolute shortage of men. Traditionally, if they took a liking to a visiting man from the outside, there was a custom of uniting with him to bear children. If the man wished, he could stay, but even if he left, the village would take responsibility for raising the child. "It's not a problem for two of us to have children with one man. Of course, cases with 3 or 4 are rare, but they have happened in our tribe's history," Lida explained. Mike was stunned into silence. Marek, looking slightly embarrassed, stammered something like, "If you don't dislike us, could you consider it?" What they wanted wasn't exactly marriage, but rather to have children to preserve their family line, and if possible, it would be even better if the man stayed with them. Mike was shocked. Having lived over 40 years, the concept of one man fathering children with 2 sisters simultaneously was completely alien to his American upbringing and framework of thinking. On the other hand, having lived childless into his 40s, he wasn't entirely devoid of a secret desire to have children. But this method was too radical. The issue of responsibility also weighed on him. Even if the village custom allowed the man to leave without blame, the thought of completely betraying them and leaving would trouble his conscience. He couldn't sleep that night. Could something like this really happen? Can I accept this? He tossed and turned. But when he thought of Lida and Marek, his heart felt strangely warm, and his explorer's curiosity flared up. Maybe this could open a new door in my life? The next day, Lida and Marek approached Mike again. "We know this is a difficult request. If you don't want to, it's okay to just leave. But from our tribe's perspective, we desperately need hope," they said. It seemed some elders in the village tacitly supported the idea, apparently judging Mike to be young and healthy enough to father children. Mike replied, "Please give me a little more time." For the next few days, he wandered around the village, mingling with the residents. In the process, he felt a growing sense of familiarity. Carrying loads with his own hands, caring for livestock, feeling the wind on the steppe, he was strangely moved by the simplicity and cohesion they displayed. Lida and Marek also began initiating natural physical contact. For example, after brushing their teeth, while climbing a nearby hill together chatting, Marek might take his hand and say with a bright smile, "How about it? Isn't this view amazing?" Lida, the wise older sister, often leaned on him subtly. Mike gradually realized that their connection was growing beyond mere rapport into budding affection. Finally, after much deliberation, he decided to accept the sisters' request. He honestly told them, "I can't promise yet if I'll settle here permanently." They replied, "We fully understand. If a child comes, we will be truly grateful. If you stay, it would be wonderful, and if you leave, we won't resent you, so don't worry." Mike felt a strange mix of emotions. Is this kind of family relationship really possible in the world? But just as he had come seeking adventure and the unknown, he felt this might be the greatest adventure of his life. A few days later, the village elders prepared a small ceremony for the sisters and Mike. It was ambiguous to call it a wedding, but they said this tribe had long held simple celebratory rituals when uniting with an outsider man. A bonfire was lit in the center of the village. Lida and Marek wore traditional clothes, and Mike wore a simple garment resembling theirs. Elders offered brief congratulations and handed the 3 of them drinks, likely fermented milk or tea, wishing for children to bring blessings to the village. Watching this scene, Mike was momentarily dumbfounded. As the sisters held his hands together and the villagers looked on with encouraging eyes, his heart pounded. It was a scene unimaginable back in the States. But in this small nomadic village, it proceeded naturally. Some elders rejoiced, finally, new blood comes into our family line. After the ceremony, as night fell, Mike and the sisters moved to the ger where they would live together. It was originally the sisters' ger, but the villagers had expanded it slightly to make it more spacious. The sisters, with bright expressions, said, "Starting today, we live together." At that moment, Mike felt his heart warm, coupled with a sense of responsibility. He smiled awkwardly, "Please take care of me too." From that night on, they began living together as one family unit. The sisters took turns interacting warmly with Mike, talking, and sometimes engaging in acts of affection. Both desperately wanted children, so physical intimacy happened naturally. Although Mike was in his 40s and still quite fit, dealing with two sisters instead of one was demanding. Despite this, the sisters showed little jealousy towards each other. According to their customs, it wasn't unheard of for multiple women to share one man, and most importantly, their sisterly bond was strong. As time passed, Mike began living entirely like a member of the village. He would wake up, do some simple exercises outside the ger, and have breakfast with the sisters, milk tea, dried cheese, bread, occasionally meat soup. During the day, he helped with village work, managing livestock, grazing them on the steppes, chopping firewood for winter preparation. The weather was harsh, and the altitude made breathing difficult, but the steppe scenery and clean air made him feel healthier. The sisters felt sorry when he took on difficult tasks, and in the evenings inside the ger, they would soothe him. Lida would gently massage his muscles, while Marek would chase away his fatigue with bright jokes and laughter. Sometimes, they would affectionately hug him and whisper, "You worked hard," in a mix of Russian and Kyrgyz. Even without perfect communication, their feelings were conveyed. The village now treated Mike completely as family. With almost no young men around, they relied on him in many ways. There were a few middle-aged men, but they were often unwell or elderly, making the young and robust Mike a valuable asset. They told him, "It's really good you came. It's good for Lida and Marek, but it feels like new vitality has come to our whole village." As the days grew shorter, the weather turned colder. Snow had already begun to fall on the nearby mountain slopes. Lida and Marek were busy preparing for winter, as was Mike. One evening, after finishing work, the three were drinking warm tea by the fire, laughing and talking, when Lida suddenly asked, "If you really have a child, will you stay by our side?" Mike thought seriously and replied honestly, "I'll try my best, at least until the child is settled. And as a father, it would be hard for me to leave." At his words, both sisters showed relieved smiles. Their cohabitation had lasted well over a month when Lida started complaining of morning sickness and lack of energy. At first, they thought it was minor indigestion, but when it persisted for several days, an elderly woman from the village examined her. Then, as if she had been waiting for it, she beamed, "There's probably a child in her belly." When this news spread, the villagers cheered, and the sisters were overjoyed. Mike felt dazed, wondering if it was a dream or reality, the result of his seed being planted. Lida, being the calmer one, was surprised by the pregnancy but seemed to feel it as a deep blessing. Mike was momentarily stunned, thinking, "Am I really becoming a father?" He finally accepted it as reality when Lida ran to him, hugged him, and said, "Thank you so much." The village rejoiced intensely, as it had been a long time since a child was expected. About 2 weeks later, Marek showed similar symptoms, morning sickness upon waking. The village elder confirmed it again, Marek was also pregnant. Now both sisters were carrying his children. Moreover, the timing was close, they would likely be only a couple of months apart. The village was in a festive mood. "Finally, new life for our tribe," they cheered. News of childbirth was rare there due to the lack of men, so having two at once was extraordinary. For Mike, the shock was doubled. He had braced himself for both sisters having his children, but when it became reality, his heart pounded. The weight of responsibility felt heavy. Lida and Marek, however, comforted him, saying, "It's a good thing. Don't feel too burdened, just stay with us. Mike replied sincerely, of course, I have no intention of leaving. I might have to go back to the US someday, but for now, I'll do my best here. With both sisters pregnant, they reduced their workload for health reasons, and other village women helped out. Mike became even busier. The sisters needed nutrition, so he often undertook small long-distance trips suggested by villagers to fetch meat, fresh vegetables, and other necessities. For instance, going to a town-like place to buy groceries or gathering large amounts of firewood from nearby areas. He willingly took on these burdens because he believed the sisters needed peace of mind for the babies to grow healthy. Lita felt weak and often dizzy in early pregnancy, while Marek suffered severe morning sickness and vomited frequently. Mike cared for them day and night, taking turns. He made sure they ate and reassured them with kind words. The sight of two pregnant women living in one ger was intriguing. At night, they would ask each other, "How are you feeling today?" And Mike would join the conversation from the side, awkwardly mixing Russian or maybe even English words. Through this life, a deep affection blossomed among the three. It was a strong bond that went beyond mere physical relations. They ate together, checked on each other's health, and managed village tasks. Lita, like the eldest, planned schedules and priorities, saying, "Let's work just this much with Mike today, and then we rest." Marek often dragged Mike outside, suggesting, "Let's just walk a little and get some fresh air," bursting into refreshing laughter. The villagers were content seeing the two pregnant women being cared for, clearly supported by Mike at the center. One elder emotionally remarked, "It's such luck that a young man like him came to our village and gave us children." Another seemed relieved, saying, "Even if he goes back to America, he has left children behind, so the family line will continue." As the sisters entered mid-pregnancy and their bellies gradually grew, the region was gripped by severe cold. Being near 3,000 meters altitude, winter days could drop to tens of degrees below 0 Celsius, -4 degrees Fahrenheit or colder. Villagers reinforced their jars and gathered as much fuel as possible to prepare for the harsh environment. However, an unexpected early blizzard struck, isolating the village. The unpaved road was covered in snow, making SUV travel difficult. Electricity was non-existent, relying only on generators or solar power. A shortage of food could be dangerous. Mike, along with a few young men from the village, wrapped chains on the SUV's tires, cleared snow, and barely managed to make a supply run towards the town. It was by no means an easy journey. If the SUV slipped on a hill, it could lead to a major accident. Nevertheless, when he successfully made the round trip and returned to the village, the sisters greeted him with teary eyes. "We're so glad you returned safely." Mike replied, "We should have enough food for a while now. You and the babies need to be safe." Lita then patted his back, saying, "Thank you. It feels like this whole village owes its life to you." Mike was exhausted but felt a sense of reward. That winter, the sisters engaged in activities similar to prenatal care, singing quiet traditional songs or doing something akin to knitting. Marek smiled brightly, "I'm trying to make clothes for our babies later." Lita, with a more serious gaze, prepared for the birth process. The elderly midwife couldn't easily come and go, so it was highly likely they would have to give birth right inside the GER. With no medical facilities, Mike was nervous. What if complications arise? So, whenever the weather permitted, he tried to drive the sisters to a clinic in town for brief checkups, but the road conditions made it difficult. He managed a couple of successful trips for ultrasounds, which thankfully showed no major problems. The doctor warned that while home births were traditional in this area, caution was necessary. Finally, as spring approached, the sisters' due dates neared. Lita went into labor first. Outside, snow still hadn't melted in many areas, and road conditions remained poor. The village elders prepared hot water inside the ger, and women gathered to assist as midwives. Mike was panicked but helpless. With virtually no medical equipment, they had to rely on traditional methods. As Lita labored for hours, sweating profusely, trying to deliver the baby, Mike waited anxiously outside the GER. He couldn't enter even if he wanted to help. Then, deep into the night, amidst screams, the cry of a baby was heard. Mike's body, tense with anxiety, slumped down in relief. An elder came out and gestured that both mother and baby were healthy. When Mike entered the GER, Lita lay exhausted but holding the baby. Her smile was radiant, and the baby's tiny movements felt miraculous. "Congratulations. You went through so much," Mike said with a trembling voice. Lita replied, teary-eyed, "Thank you." The villagers celebrated quietly, holding a small feast the next morning. Before the joy could fully subside, about 2 weeks later, it was Marek's turn. Marek, carrying the second child, had a more outgoing personality and reportedly joked during labor, "I want to give birth faster than my sister." Indeed, her labor wasn't as long as Lita's, but the baby was in a breech position, giving the midwives a hard time. Mike was terrified that something terrible might happen. The experienced midwife skillfully managed to turn the baby, and it safely entered the world. Upon hearing the baby's cry, Marek burst into tears of exhaustion and joy, smiling brightly. Mike had become a father for the second time through another miracle. This situation would be unthinkable back home. But here, it was a blessing. Despite one man fathering children with 2 sisters, no one found it strange. Instead, they praised him, "Amazing. The children will grow up well." As spring blossomed, the village welcomed new life onto the thawing ground. Lita, Marek, and the 2 babies quickly settled into the GER. There wasn't much in the way of formal postpartum care, but following the elders' instructions, they avoided strenuous activity for a period, consumed high-calorie foods, and rested. Mike was busy day and night caring for them, but the sound of babies crying thrilled him. Now, 4 people lived in the GER. Or perhaps should it be called 3? Lita and Marek each raised their own baby, but since Mike was the father to both, they could broadly be considered one family. Besides, village custom, while not common, did not forbid multiple women sharing one husband and having children. One might expect jealousy, but the sisters actually cooperated, sharing childcare duties. When Lita needed to move a heavy water container, Marek did it instead. If Marek's baby cried incessantly, Lita would help soothe it. Mike tried his best to divide his attention equally between them. Although both sisters called him husband or father, a peculiar situation unseen anywhere else in the world, the atmosphere within the GER was peaceful. However, after about a month, he realized how demanding childcare was. With 2 babies crying alternately day and night, other village women took turns helping. But the sisters still had many tasks they had to handle themselves, and it was tough. Meanwhile, Mike often traveled long distances to fetch grains or nutritious food to help the sisters recover their strength. When he returned home, the sight of the babies staring blankly at him was endearing, and the sisters' smiles saying, "You worked hard. We managed well thanks to you," gave him strength. The village celebrated the birth of the 2 children grandly. As time went on, elders would visit the GER, asking if the babies needed anything. Resources like formula or diapers were limited, so they used traditional cloth diapers, raising the children in the old ways. From Mike's perspective, it was clumsy, but watching the sisters skillfully change, wash, and dry them, he admired the system they had even in this remote place. Meanwhile, about a month after the babies were born, a seed of anxiety grew in Mike's heart. He might feel the need to return to the US, and conflict arose within him. Could he really live here forever? The sisters seemed to notice, and one night they had a late conversation in the GER. Lita spoke first. "If you ever leave someday, we will raise the children well. But if you stay with us, it would bring us immense joy." Marek added, "When the children are a bit older and can move around, maybe one of us could visit America with you." "I think that possibility is open too," expressing hope. Mike felt conflicted. Deep down, an American part of him wondered if he didn't want to raise his children outside this environment. Would he have to give up modern education or healthcare benefits easily accessible back home? But the sisters were steadfast, "Raising children here is no problem. Nomads in Mongolia and other countries grow up fine in these environments." Thinking of the intense pressures and costs back in the US, their free lifestyle seemed enviable at times. They decided not to reach a conclusion yet, but to think about it more over time. Maybe when the children are around 1 year old, things will be easier? Let's live as a family here until then, they agreed. The sisters smiled. That sounds good. Right now, just taking care of the babies is overwhelming. Mike felt both relieved and burdened by their words. Subsequently, through the process of raising the children with the sisters, Mike discovered another side of life. He experienced firsthand how the steppe nomads, whom he had only seen in documentaries, formed such intimate and strong communities. He marveled at the simple joys and sorrows of watching his children grow. It felt like an experience more valuable than any adventure in the world. Nomadic life wasn't easy. Constant tasks like moving livestock, preparing for winter, and traveling far by SUV for water and fuel remained arduous. But returning to the gur where the sisters and children awaited him, a rare sense of relief washed over him. Marek would playfully welcome him. You worked hard. Lita would calmly wipe his sweat, and the baby's cooing greetings would make all fatigue vanish. Some days, the entire village moved like a festival, herding horses to a nearby pasture, building a bonfire, and cooking food there. At those moments, laughing and talking with his family, Mike would murmur, I can't believe I'm living in a scene like this. Lita would respond gratefully, before you came, I hadn't felt this kind of laughter for a long time. As seasons changed and the children grew little by little, the three explored new possibilities. Could they move to a city for the children's education? Could Mike return to the US periodically and bring back resources to support them? Could he ever bring them to America? Countless future scenarios unfolded. But one thing was clear, they had become an inseparable family. The villagers also told them, when the children are older, you can do as you please. You can stay here and continue the nomadic life, or leave for the city or another country, but you are always welcome back. Mike might take the sisters and children to the United States someday, facing immense cultural challenges, but for now, this nomadic life itself felt like the greatest gift of his life, making it hard to leave easily. Perhaps, as time passes, when the children are older and the sisters wish to learn more about the outside world, they might leave the village and stay in a city like Bishkek. One or both sisters might even visit the US. There would be many difficulties in that process, but the three would support each other with trust and find solutions. At this moment, stars pour down from the night sky, and a gentle wind blows across the steppe. Inside the gur, the sisters care for the babies, and Mike watches them with a smile. The story of a foreign man entering this mountain village and continuing the family line with two sisters, it sounds like an unbelievable tale from an American perspective, but here it is reality. Within it, there is love, responsibility, and the spirit of adventure. Mike Anderson is experiencing firsthand the kind of deep emotion he might never have known if he had remained confined to a sterile office for his entire life. Though the form is unconventional, for them, it is the most natural and obvious way of life. The sisters, Mike, and the two babies are each growing and dreaming of another future. The ending is not yet written. No one knows where the children will go as they grow up, or how the family relationship among the three will change. But that doesn't matter. At this moment, they laugh and cry together, living with their feet planted firmly on the vast land of Kyrgyzstan. Thank you for watching today.